There is a fundamental misunderstanding that society has planted in your mind since you were young enough to believe everything adults told you, that maturity looks like this: a stable job, a fixed salary, a predictable schedule from Monday through Friday, that once you have that, you have arrived, that those who don't have it are simply not grown up enough, not realistic enough, or living inside some naive dream. But what almost no one ever dares to question is this: what happens inside a human being when, day after day, they walk into a room that is not theirs, sit in front of a screen that speaks nothing of who they are, and carry out tasks that have no relationship whatsoever to the reason they came into this world? What happens to that soul? Your monthly paycheck is not a reward. It is the amount they agreed to pay you for your silence. Let that sentence sit inside your chest for a moment. Do not rush to judge it. Do not rush to reject it. Simply feel whether it touches something real in you. Because there is a part of you, a very real and very exhausted part, that has known this for a long time. That part wakes up on Monday morning and feels something heavier than tiredness. That part sits through meetings that stretch on and quietly wonders, is this truly what I was born to do? That part looks at the numbers in the bank account at the end of the month and recognizes, with a kind of hollow clarity, that those numbers are just enough to keep the loop going for one more month, nothing more. This is not pessimism, this is awakening. And awakening, however painful it sometimes feels, is always where real freedom begins. Let us look at the psychological mechanism underneath all of this, because it runs far deeper than most people realize. Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychological minds in history, wrote about something he called the persona, the mask we put on to face the external world. The persona is not inherently the enemy. In the beginning, it was a survival tool. You learned how to become the model employee, the responsible child, the person who never causes trouble, because those roles earned you acceptance, protection, and a place within a society that had very specific rules about who deserved to belong. But the crisis begins when the persona grows thicker than the true self living underneath it. When you have worn the mask of the diligent worker for so long that you have forgotten what your real face looks like. When you have said "I am fine" so many times that you can no longer detect when you are not. When you have reshaped every desire, every talent, every quiet ambition to fit inside the rectangular frame of a job description, until you can no longer remember what you once wanted before the world told you to want something safer. Psychologists call this process decay, and its most dangerous quality is that it is not loud, it is not dramatic. It does not arrive like a crisis you can point to and name. It moves the way water moves through stone, slowly, daily, monthly, yearly, and then one day you look in the mirror and see someone who appears, by every external measurement, to be perfectly stable. But their eyes carry a certain emptiness that you cannot quite explain, even to yourself. This is not weakness. This is what happens to a sovereign being who has been living inside borrowed definitions of success for too long. Napoleon Hill, in his foundational work on human potential, identified one quality above all others that separated those who lived fully from those who merely existed. He called it definiteness of purpose, not talent, not circumstance, not inherited advantage. Simply the burning clarity of knowing what you are here to build, and refusing to negotiate that knowledge away for the comfort of a predictable income. When you lack that clarity, the system is more than willing to provide a purpose for you. Clock in, complete the task. Clock out, collect the salary, repeat. It is an elegant architecture of surrender, and it is dressed so beautifully in the language of responsibility that most people never recognize it as a cage at all. They call it security. They call it being realistic. They call it finally growing up. What they do not tell you is that real security, security at the deepest psychological level, is not the feeling that your rent is covered. Real security is the unshakable sense that you are moving, every single day, in the direction of something that is genuinely yours. That the energy you pour out each morning is building something with your name on it, not filling someone else's vision with your unrepeatable hours. When external stability and internal sovereignty become separated, what you are left with is not peace. What you are left with is a comfortable enclosure, still an enclosure, simply a more comfortable one. And here is where it becomes important to understand something about the people around you who have made peace with that enclosure. Because they will not simply stay quiet about your restlessness. They rarely do. When you begin to question the structure, when you start withdrawing your full emotional investment from the performance of contentment, when you grow quieter at the dinner table, because you are no longer willing to pretend that everything is fine, you will notice something. The people who are most deeply invested in the system will become the most unsettled by your stillness. They will call it instability. They will call it ingratitude. They will remind you of the risks with a kind of urgency that, if you listen carefully enough, sounds less like concern for you and more like fear about what your questioning reflects back at them. This is not cruelty on their part. It is psychology. When one person in a shared system begins to wake up, their awakening functions like a mirror held up to everyone who chose to stay asleep. Your discontent does not just belong to you. It silently indicts a choice that others made and continue to make every single day. And the mind, in its desire to protect itself from that indictment, will often attack the mirror rather than examine the reflection. So they will tell you that you are being idealistic, that everyone feels this way, that this is just what adult life looks like, that you should be grateful for what you have, and perhaps in your most exhausted moments, you believe them. But here is what no one ever told you about that exhaustion. It was never a sign that you were wrong. It was a sign that you were awake inside a system designed for people who had stopped asking questions. The fatigue you feel on Sunday evening, that quiet dread that settles in before the week begins, is not a character flaw. It is not ingratitude. It is not anxiety that needs to be managed with better morning routines or more motivational content. It is your nervous system, the most honest part of you, sending a signal that something fundamental is misaligned, that the life you are performing on the outside and the life you were built for on the inside have drifted so far apart that even your body can feel the distance. In the language of psychology, this is called overfunctioning in a misaligned environment. You are not underperforming. You are exhausting yourself performing the wrong role on the wrong stage for an audience that was never meant to be the witness to your real life. And here is the deeper truth underneath that. High-capacity people, people with genuine depth, genuine vision, genuine creative intelligence, suffer the most inside rigid systems precisely because of their capacity, not in spite of it. The more alive you are, the more suffocating the cage feels. This is not a problem to be fixed. This is a compass pointing toward the door. So let us talk about the moment of awakening, because it does not always arrive as a dramatic revelation. Sometimes it arrives as a very quiet, very clear question that surfaces one ordinary afternoon while you are sitting at your desk doing something you have done 1,000 times before. The question is simply this: is this it? Not asked in despair, not asked in anger, asked with a kind of calm, almost curious honesty. Is this the full expression of what I am capable of? Is this the best use of the one life I have been given? Is this the story I want to be telling when I look back from the end? That question is not a crisis. That question is the beginning of sovereignty. Jung called the process of removing the persona and returning to the authentic self-individuation. It is the journey from living according to the expectations of the collective toward living from the center of your own truth. And it is, without exception, the most important psychological work a human being can do in their lifetime. But individuation requires something that the comfort of a stable salary actively works against. It requires you to sit with uncertainty long enough to discover what you actually believe, what you actually want, and what you are actually willing to build, when the structure of someone else's system is no longer there to tell you who to be from 9 in the morning until 5 in the evening. This is why the salary is so strategically effective as a tool of containment. It is not just money, it is a monthly renewal of a contract that says, your identity is safe here. You do not have to face the terrifying, magnificent question of who you are outside of this role. Just show up, just perform, and at the end of the month, we will confirm for you that you exist. The awakening, when it truly comes, does not look like quitting your job in a blaze of righteous fury. It looks much quieter than that, and much more powerful. It looks like a shift in where your authority lives. Before the awakening, your sense of safety came from outside yourself, from the approval of a manager, from the security of a contract, from the validation of a title on a business card, from the relief of knowing that the system had a place for you and that you were filling it adequately enough to remain. After the awakening, you begin the slow and sometimes uncomfortable process of moving that authority inward, of deciding that your judgment about your own life is more trustworthy than the consensus of people who have never had to live it, of recognizing that the stability you were chasing was never really located in the paycheck. It was located in the depth of your relationship with your own purpose. This is what Napoleon Hill meant when he wrote about the mastermind principle, not simply the strategy of surrounding yourself with capable people, but the deeper truth that when a human being aligns their conscious mind, their emotional energy, and their daily actions around a single definite purpose, they access a quality of intelligence and resolve that is simply not available to someone living in fragmentation. The mind unified by purpose operates at a different level than the mind divided between what it wants and what it has been told it is allowed to want. And this is the moment where boundaries become not just relevant but essential. Not boundaries as aggression, not boundaries as punishment or withdrawal, or a way of announcing to the world that you have decided to become difficult. Boundaries as the architecture of your new life. When you begin to live from sovereignty rather than from compliance, you will naturally start to make different choices about where your time goes, where your energy flows, and which relationships and environments are allowed into the sacred space of your attention. You will find yourself less willing to spend hours in conversations that drain without replenishing, less willing to invest your most creative hours into work that builds nothing you believe in, less willing to shrink your vision to fit inside someone else's comfort level. This is not coldness. This is discernment. The difference between the two is everything. Coldness is the absence of feeling. Discernment is feeling deeply enough to know what is worth feeling for. It is the capacity to say, with genuine warmth and zero apology, this is where I end and where something else begins. This is the perimeter of what I am building, and I am no longer willing to negotiate that perimeter away in exchange for the temporary comfort of belonging to a structure that was never designed with my flourishing in mind. There will be people who do not understand this shift in you. And that is important to say clearly, because the moment you begin withdrawing your energy from the performance of contentment, the moment you stop pretending that the cage is a palace, some of the people closest to you will experience your clarity as a kind of abandonment. They will not have the language for what they are feeling, so they will translate it into criticism. They will say you have changed. They will say you have become arrogant or impractical or lost. They will remind you of everything you have to lose with a precision that suggests they have been keeping careful inventory. Do not harden against them, but do not collapse back into smallness to comfort them either. Understand what is actually happening beneath the surface of their reaction. They are not responding to you. They are responding to the mirror you have become. Because when you stand up inside a system and quietly, firmly, without drama or performance, begin living as though your life belongs to you, you make visible a choice that everyone in that system is making every single day. The choice to stay. And for those who have buried their own restlessness so deeply that they can no longer feel it, your awakening does not look like inspiration. It looks like accusation. This is not your burden to carry. Their peace with their own choices is their work to do, not yours to facilitate by shrinking back into a version of yourself that no longer fits. What you are doing when you begin to reclaim your sovereignty is not rebellion. It is not recklessness. It is not the naive enthusiasm of someone who has not yet learned how the world works. It is the most mature thing a human being can do. It is the decision to stop outsourcing the authorship of your life to a system that was never built to serve your deepest interests. To take full, undefended ownership of the fact that you came into this world with something specific to offer, something that cannot be captured in a job title or measured in quarterly performance reviews, and that the truest form of responsibility you have is not to an employer, but to that offering. Napoleon Hill wrote that every human being who has ever created something of lasting significance began with one non-negotiable internal commitment. Not a plan, not a strategy, not a network or a set of resources, a commitment, a decision made in the deepest chamber of the self that said, I will not die having lived someone else's definition of my life. That commitment is not comfortable. It does not come with guarantees. It does not arrive with a safety net already in place. It arrives, usually, in the middle of an ordinary moment, when the distance between who you are and who you have been pretending to be finally becomes too wide to bridge with more patience or more discipline or more telling yourself that this is simply what adult life requires. And when it arrives, here is what I want you to know. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not someone who wasted years by not seeing this sooner. Every year you spent inside the system taught you something that you could not have learned any other way. You learned the texture of misalignment from the inside. You learned what it feels like to trade your hours for security and discover that the security never fully arrives. You learned the specific weight of a Sunday evening dread and a Monday morning performance and a Friday afternoon relief that lasts approximately 48 hours before the cycle begins again. You learned, in your body and your nervous system and the quiet places of your mind that never fully went to sleep, exactly what you are not willing to keep doing. That knowledge is not wasted time. That knowledge is the foundation of every clear decision you will make from here forward. The person you are becoming does not need to announce themselves loudly. Sovereignty does not perform. It does not require an audience. It does not post declarations or seek validation from the people it has outgrown. It simply begins, quietly and with increasing confidence, to architect a life that is structured around what is real rather than what is expected. You begin making different choices, not all at once, not in a single dramatic gesture, but consistently, persistently, with the kind of quiet determination that does not need external permission to keep moving. You begin directing your most alive hours toward building something with your name on it. You begin treating your attention as the most valuable currency you possess, because it is, and spending it with a level of intention that the old version of you, the version living inside borrowed definitions of success, never felt entitled to. You begin to understand that authority is not something that is given to you by a title or a salary or a position within someone else's hierarchy. Authority is something you claim through the daily, undramatic, unglamorous act of living in alignment with what you actually believe. This is what it means to wear the crown rather than the mask. The mask was always someone else's design. It was fitted to your face by a system that needed you compliant, predictable, and just uncomfortable enough to keep working harder for a stability that would always remain slightly out of reach. The mask served its purpose. It kept you safe during the years when safety was the most important thing. But you are no longer in those years. The crown is different. The crown does not make you immune to difficulty. It does not protect you from uncertainty or guarantee that every risk you take will resolve in your favor. What it does is far more significant than any of that. It restores to you the one thing that the salary was quietly purchasing from you every single month. Your presence. Not your physical presence in a building from 9 to 5, your true presence. The full, unedited, undivided presence of a human being who is living their actual life, rather than a performance of someone else's idea of what their life should look like. The presence of someone who goes to sleep at night knowing that the hours of that day belong to something real. The presence of someone whose eyes, when you look into them, are not empty, but inhabited. That presence cannot be given to you by any employer, any institution, or any system of external reward. It can only be reclaimed, piece by piece, choice by choice, boundary by boundary, purpose by purpose. So here is where we arrive. You are not a diligent employee who occasionally fantasizes about something more. You are not someone who simply needs a better job or a higher salary or a more supportive manager. You are a sovereign being who has been living inside a rented identity for long enough that it started to feel like your own skin. And the discomfort you have been feeling, the Sunday dread, the hollow clarity at the end of the month, the quiet question that surfaces in ordinary moments and refuses to be silenced, that discomfort is not a malfunction. It is the most intelligent signal your inner life has ever sent you. It is the sound of the real you, patient and undefeated, knocking from the inside of the persona you built to survive, reminding you that survival was never the full extent of what you came here to do. You came here to build, to create, to bring something into existence that would not exist without you. To live with the kind of purposeful, unhurried, deeply rooted authority that does not need a system's permission to know its own worth. The stability you were promised was always a ceiling dressed as a floor. You were told it was the foundation, but it was always the limit. Your real foundation is not a salary. It is not a contract. It is not the approval of people who have already made their peace with smallness. Your real foundation is the unshakable knowledge of what you are here to architect. And once you have that, truly have it, not as a concept but as a lived commitment in the marrow of your decisions, no cage will ever feel stable enough to stay in again. The crown was always yours. You simply forgot, for a while, that you were the one who had the right to wear it. That forgetting is over now.